Good day, STEM 11 students. So welcome to another pre-recorded lecture for week 2 or module 2. So for today's pre-recorded lecture, we will talk about two topics. First, we're going to know about the difference between prokaryotic cells and also eukaryotic cells. And the second topic that you're going to learn in this pre-recorded lecture are the different cell types. So let us proceed to the first lesson, which is the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. But before going to lesson 3, or our first lesson for this pre-recorded lecture, we will review on unicellular and multicellular organisms. So what is the difference between a unicellular organism and also a multicellular organism? So for unicellular organism, it is very obvious from the name itself or from the term itself. Uni means one or single. So these organisms, they are made up of a single cell, or they are only made up of one cell. So for example, we have a bacterium. So single organism raman, we will call that bacterium. So if daghan sila, we will call that bacteria. Okay? Then on the other hand, we have multicellular organisms. So from the term itself, multi meaning many or daghan. So multicellular organisms, these are organisms that are made up of many cells. So for example, we have, of course, the human organism. We also have other organisms that we can obviously see with our eyes, like this one. And also, there are also multicellular organisms nga dili nato siya makita diretso with our eyes because they are small enough nga kailangan pa siya i-view og microscope. But although kailangan pa sila i-view og microscope, it doesn't mean there are unicellular organisms. They are composed of several cells, but they are not big enough to be seen with our naked eye. So all living organisms are classified according to how many number of cells they have or they are composed of. So we have unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. But living organisms can also be classified according to their cell structure or cell nature. So there are two classifications of living organisms according to cell structure or cell nature. So first we have prokaryotes. So prokaryotes, these are organisms that are made up of prokaryotic cell. And we also have eukaryotes. So eukaryotes are organisms that are made up of eukaryotic cells. So what are prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell? So we will get to know that in the next slide. So I just want to clarify, when you refer to organisms that are made up of prokaryotic cell, you will not say that they are prokaryotic organisms. So you will call them prokaryotes, okay? Sa cell pod, you do not refer to that one as prokaryote cell. So you will say prokaryotic cell. So that also applies to our eukaryote and eukaryotic cells respectively. So let us know what is a prokaryotic cell and also what is a eukaryotic cell. So first, let us go to eukaryotic cells. So I know na namoy idea about eukaryotic cells because in the previous module on lesson 2, so we have focused on the different cell structures and their corresponding functions on the two types of eukaryotic cells. So we have the animal cell and the plant cell. So na mo'y idea about eukaryotic cell. The word eukaryotic or the term eukaryotic came from the Greek words eu meaning true and karyon meaning not or nucleus. So if you're going to combine these two words, so eukaryotic cells have a true nucleus. So the primary characteristic of eukaryotic cells is that they have a membrane-bound nucleus. So, unsa gali ng membrane-bound? So, membrane-bound, it means that an organelle or cell structure is surrounded or covered by a membrane. So, ang nucleus sa eukaryotic cell, here is the nucleus of our eukaryotic cells. So, the nucleus is surrounded or covered by a membrane called the nuclear envelope. And also, you have known in the previous module that the genetic material or DNA, so unsa gitong DNA? Do not forget that DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So the genetic material or DNA is contained in our membrane-bound nucleus. So another characteristic of eukaryotic cells is that they have membrane-bound organelles. So meaning ani, these organelles are either surrounded or covered by a membrane, or these organelles are made up of membrane. So example of membrane-bound organelles, we have the mitochondria. So unsa gitong mitochondria? The powerhouse of the cell. So it provides and stores energy. Then we also have the endoplasmic reticulum. So we have two types of endoplasmic reticulum, diba? So we have the rough and the smooth ER or endoplasmic reticulum. Also, another example of membrane-bound organelles in eukaryotic cells, we have the Golgi apparatus. So don't forget sa pagsulat sa Golgi ha, that is capital G because that is named after a person who discovered this organelle. Then we also have chloroplasts. So chloroplasts are also membrane-bound organelles, but they can only be found in plants and algae. So expert na mo aning eukaryotic cells. So let us proceed to prokaryotic cells or prokaryotic cell. So prokaryotic cell, mauni iya ang structure, or this is the appearance of a prokaryotic cell. So the word prokaryotic or the term prokaryotic is derived from the Greek words pro, so pro meaning before, and karyon meaning nut or nucleus. So if you're going to join these two meanings, so prokaryotic means before the nucleus. So pasabot ani that prokaryotic cell kay before the nucleus man. So ang major characteristic sa prokaryotic cell is that they don't have or they lack a membrane-bound nucleus. So ang pinaka characteristic or ilhanan sa prokaryotic cells is that wala sila'y nucleus. Okay? Since wala sila'y nucleus, it doesn't mean wala po'y genetic material or DNA ang prokaryotic cells. Naagyapon sila'y genetic material or DNA, bahalag walay nucleus. Okay? So, asa nato makita ang genetic material or DNA of prokaryotic cells? So, ang DNA or genetic material of prokaryotic cells, kay wala may nucleus nga mag-contain siya or mag-enclose siya. So, the DNA is located here sa cytoplasm sa ato ang prokaryotic cell. Okay, sa cytoplasm. But to be specific sa location sa genetic material sa atong prokaryotic cells, they are located sa central region of the prokaryotic cells cytoplasm or space, central region or space called the nucleoid. Okay? So, remember that nucleoid is not a structure or an organelle. Nucleoid is just a central region sa cytoplasm sa ato ang prokaryotic cells. And also, as you can observe sa ato ang illustration of a prokaryotic cell, so ang prokaryotic cell di ay dili na siya inaning itsura gyud I correct myself earlier. Di na siya inani nga expose ang iya ang cell parts or structures. Okay? So, kanilang siya para this illustration is para makita naton sa isulod sa prokaryotic cell. Okay. As you can observe sa ato ang prokaryotic cell, you can see that the prokaryotic cell have less cell structures, no? That is because another major characteristic of prokaryotic cells is that they don't have membrane-bound organelles. So meaning ani, prokaryotic cells doesn't have those membrane-bound organelles like I have mentioned earlier, katong mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum, wala po dyan nucleus. So, prokaryotic cells have a simple internal structure compared to eukaryotic cells. Because eukaryotic cells, they are much more complex. Ang nakapa-complex sa eukaryotic cells kay ang mga membrane-bound organelles. Compared sa prokaryotic cells nga walay membrane-bound organelles and it has less nga cell structures. Although ang prokaryotic cells are simpler compared to eukaryotic cells, but prokaryotic cells have other characteristics nga wala sa ato ang eukaryotic cells. Okay? So, nearly all prokaryotic cells are surrounded by a cell wall. So, nagapoy cell wall sa eukaryotic cell, but to be specific, ang plant cell. But ang composition sa cell wall sa plant cell o ang cell wall sa prokaryotic cell is different ang iyang material. Okay, ako lang siyang i-mention. So please take note that the cell wall of plant cells, they are made up of cellulose, while the cell wall of prokaryotic cell is made up of what we call peptidoglycan. Okay, peptidoglycan. 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 Okay, so what is the purpose of the cell wall for prokaryotic cell? So the cell wall of prokaryotic cell is a stiff coating that the cell secretes around itself to provide protection, help maintain its shape, and prevent dehydration. Okay, so why is it so significant ang cell wall for prokaryotic cells? That is because prokaryotic cell, as you can see, it is only made up of one cell. Kaya made up of one cell naman ang atuang organism. So, dako kay ni siya og chance, or let us say, kay one cell naman siya, dali ra pud siya matay. So, gamay lang change sa iyang environment or anything, since one cell naman siya, dali ra jud siya mamatay. So, one of the things that would protect a prokaryotic cell in its environment is the cell wall. So, I have mentioned na ang function sa cell wall. So, for protection, to maintain its shape, kay one cell naman siya, so at least na ay makapamaintain sa iyang shape or to give its shape, and also to prevent dehydration or to prevent water loss. Organisms that are made up of prokaryotic cells, or we also call them prokaryotes. So examples sa mga prokaryotes are bacteria. And bacteria, they are very diverse. Lain-lain po ning mga bacteria, no? As you can see, they have different shapes and sizes. Okay? So another characteristic of prokaryotic cell, for example, bacteria. So many bacteria, so not all bacteria. So many bacteria, they secrete a capsule. So if we're going to locate the capsule here in this illustration, where is the capsule? Nara. After siya sa cell wall. So the capsule is secreted by the prokaryote or bacteria. And the function of the capsule is that it enables the cell to attach to surfaces in its environment. So although prokaryotes are made up of one cell and taas ka ilang chance to die or they have high mortality rate, but these structures, the cell wall and the capsule, help them to at least prolong their life. Pero i-compare nimo ang prokaryotes ug sa ubang organisms, particularly multicellular organisms, mas taas gid gyapon og lifespan ang mga multicellular organisms. But in order to help the prokaryotic cell survive in its environment, so na-mention naman ako ganiha ang function sa cell wall. So the capsule also helps bacteria, many bacteria, to attach to surfaces in its environment. Okay? So aside from the cell structures of prokaryotic cells, like the cell wall and capsule that would help prokaryotes to survive in its environment, naapoy mga cell structures ang ubang mga prokaryotes that would also help them survive in their environment. Okay? So we have some prokaryotes have flagella, pili, or fimbriae. Okay? So dili tanang prokaryotes kay nay flagella, pili, and fimbriae kanang tulo. No. So nay ubang prokaryotes nga naala siya flagella. For example, here we have this species of bacteria, this Vibrio cholerae. We have Helicobacter pylori causes ulcer. Okay? Another prokaryote species that have flagella, nata diri we call that Salmonella typhi. I forgot the pronunciation. Let us say typhi. Salmonella typhi. And we also have wala na di. Okay? So some prokaryotes have pili or fimbriae. So let us know each function of these cell structures found in prokaryotes. So for flagella, flagella is plural. When you refer to only one structure of a flagella or isa lang ka flagella, we call that flagellum, singular flagellum. So flagella that is used for movement of the prokaryote or locomotion. So not all bacteria can move on its own. No, so if the bacteria, for example, bacteria or the prokaryote bacteria have a flagella, so they can move on its own. For example, kani siya, kani, and kani. But if wala siya flagella, for example, this following bacteria nga species, they cannot move on its own. So if this bacteria will move from one place to another, it needs a medium. For example, madala siya sa hangin or madala siya sa tubig, okay? Then another cell structure that are found in some prokaryotes, so some lang, dili sila tanan, is that we have the pili. That is plural form. Singular form is pilus. So what is pili or pilus? This structure functions to, or that is used to exchange genetic material during a type of reproduction called conjugation. So mga bacteria, they have this type of reproduction called conjugation, in which these two bacterial organism, they would attach to each other. So para maka-attach sila to each other, it uses this structure called the pili. Okay? So if you're curious about conjugation, so you can search about that one sa Google Images, so para makita ninyo unsay itsura sa conjugation. Okay? Then last, we have the cell structure called fimbriae, or singular fimbria. So the function of fimbriae or fimbria that is used by bacteria to attach to a host cell. So para secure gyud iya ang attachment or pag-stick niya to another cell. Okay? So for example, there are bacteria on the surfaces of your skin. We don't know where, surrounded by different microorganisms, so including bacteria. So in order to secure ang attachment sa bacteria sa ato ang skin, since our skin is made up of cells, so fimbria or fimbriae would help secure the attachment. So we also have another characteristic for prokaryotic cells. So please remember that all prokaryotes are unicellular organisms. So there is no prokaryote nga multicellular organism. They are all unicellular organisms. But not all unicellular organisms are prokaryotes. Okay? So there are some unicellular organisms nga eukaryote pod. Okay? So let us know some examples of this one later. Okay? So now let us proceed to other characteristics between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. So other characteristic between prokaryotic cell and eukaryotic cell is their size in terms ni siya of diameter. Okay? So prokaryotic cell, ang ilang size in terms of diameter, it ranges from 0.1 to 5.0 micrometers. So this unit of measurement is mas gamay pag yun siya sa millimeters, like gamay jud kay ni siya. So that would be kung exponent ni siya, that would be 10 raised to the power of negative 6. And then we also have eukaryotic cells. So ilang size na siya nag-range between 10 to 100 micrometers. Okay? So as you can compare the size between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, so mas dako ang eukaryotic cells. So what is the reason why eukaryotic cells are much bigger in size compared to prokaryotic cells? Sagali? That is because eukaryotic cells have more membrane-bound organelles. Much complex ang eukaryotic cells compared to prokaryotic cells, in which prokaryotic cells doesn't have a nucleus, doesn't have membrane-bound organelles. So prokaryotic cells are much simpler compared to eukaryotic cells. Next, we have the example of organism groups. Okay? So meaning ani is what organism are considered nga prokaryotes or eukaryotes. Okay? So, mga example ng organism groups sa prokaryotic cells is that we have classified them into two. We have the domain bacteria. So, na-introduce na nako ang bacteria ganiha. No? So, domain bacteria, they are unicellular organisms that are present in most habitats. So, everywhere we are surrounded by bacteria in every surface, even the air, the water we drink, they are bacteria. But I just want to clarify this misconception about bacteria, no? So not all bacteria are dangerous. So we always correlate bacteria to diseases or kana makakos og sakit. No. There are mga bacteria that we call mga harmful bacteria, makakos og sakit. We call that pathogenic, no? Pathogenic. And then we also have mga bacteria that they don't harm us. So we call them non-pathogenic. Okay? So bacteria is just everywhere. And then we also have another example nga organism groups belonging to prokaryotes, or they are made up of prokaryotic cells. We have the domain archaea. So, domain archaea, these are unicellular organisms. So, kaning mga archaea or archaeans, sa una, they are classified together with bacteria because they are unicellular organisms man. But later, they found out that these archaea, they are not found everywhere. They are only found in extreme environments. When I say extreme environments, so these environments, ang condition ani nga mga environments is grabe kayo. For example, mga hot spring. So we cannot survive on a hot spring because it is very hot, okay? So extreme environments, these are where other living organisms could not survive. So ang makasurvive sa mga extreme environments is, for example, katong mga unicellular organisms nga unicellular organisms nga makatolerate og extreme nga condition. For example, init kayo like hot spring, na yung mga unicellular organism diya nga mabuhi. Okay? Napoy mga archaeans nga mo survive in mga environment with little oxygen. Naapoy mga archaeans nga makasurvive in They can survive in environments nga taas kay saline. Saline means salt. So, salty kay siya nga environment. So, too much salt is dangerous for living organisms. So, na mga living organisms like these archaeans that could thrive on very salty environment ng taas kayo og salt content, no? So, if you're curious about archaea na siya yung mga subdivision, mga different types of archaean. So, maorto akong gipang introduce. Next, we have the following organism groups that are eukaryotes, or they are composed of eukaryotic cells. So, first, we have the kingdom Animalia. So, kingdom Animalia are composed of multicellular organisms. So, from the word itself, Animalia, so animals. So, obviously, my example ani is us, human organisms. We also have animals that you see around in your house, maybe nasa farm, o kabalo naman na. And then we also have organisms under the kingdom Plantae. So these are multicellular organisms. So from the word itself, Plantae. So ang mga plants nato, ang makita nato sa palibot, they are eukaryotes and they belong to kingdom Plantae. And then next we have another example of eukaryotes. We have organisms under the kingdom Fungi. So kingdom Fungi, the organisms in kingdom Fungi could either be unicellular or multicellular organisms. So mauna ni akong ingon ganiha nga not all unicellular organisms are prokaryotes. Some of them are eukaryotes. So example, we have unicellular organisms under the kingdom Fungi. So specifically, unicellular organism under kingdom Fungi, one of the example is yeast. So kabalo man ng yeast, da mo na siya gipang sagol na to sa bread, parang bread kay mo alsa, okay, or mutubo. Then for multicellular organisms under kingdom Fungi, another example we have mushrooms. Then we also have other organisms under the kingdom Fungi, example mold. So kanang pagkaon ninyo des inyong balunan nga wag yugasan, or kanang bread nga gibiyaan, so kanang mutubo diha, that is molds. Okay, pag nagay mo makita ang molds sa inyong bread, no, although a certain part sa inyong bread kay na ay molds, walang uban kay wala, do not eat. Ayaw na siya kan agyod, promise, because katong part nga walay gitubuan nga molds, naagya puntoy molds actually, pero di lang siya makita. Okay, and then another example of eukaryotes, we have unicellular organisms or multicellular organisms under kingdom Protista. Okay, so kingdom Protista are also made up of unicellular organisms. So example, ani ako lang siyang i-mention, we have amoeba. So you all know amoeba could cause kanang sakit, no, kanang sa tawag ani, never experience having amoebiasis. So when an amoeba goes inside your body, so it could mukot-kot na siya dito sa imo ang digestive tract. So muna pag malibang kay nay dugo. Okay, and then another example of unicellular organism under kingdom Protista, we have Paramecium. And then for multicellular organism under kingdom Protista, we have algae. Okay, so kingdom Protista, kani siya nga mga unicellular or multicellular organism. They are not animals, they are not plant or fungi, but these organisms, it's either they are animal-like, gina-term na sila as animal-like or plant-like. Okay, so that would be all for the different organism groups under both prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. But don't worry, we will dig deeper about these different organism groups in general biology too. Okay? So in summary, between the differences of prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. So first, let us start on the nucleus. So as we all know, prokaryotic cells doesn't have or they lack nucleus, while eukaryotic cells, they have a nucleus, a membrane-bound nucleus. Then for the presence of membrane-bound organelles, so prokaryotic cells doesn't have membrane-bound organelles, while eukaryotic cells have membrane-bound organelles. Although prokaryotic cells doesn't have membrane-bound organelles, but prokaryotic cells have cell components or structures that are present that that are also present in eukaryotic cells. So for example, we have the DNA. We also have the cell membrane, so present in both prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. We also have the cell wall, but cell wall is not present in animal cells, only present in plants and prokaryotic cells. But lahi lang sila og composition sa cell wall. For plants, ang composition siyang cell wall is made up of cellulose, while for prokaryotic cells, it is made up of peptidoglycan. Also, both prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells have ribosomes and cytoplasm. Next characteristic would be the location of genetic material. Since prokaryotic cell doesn't have a nucleus, so its genetic material or DNA is floating freely in the central region called the nucleoid, central region of the cytoplasm. Okay? But I forgot to mention earlier that in the cytoplasm of prokaryotic cell, naapoy gyapon mga genetic material di makita nimo. Kanang plasmids. So plasmids, these are circular nga mga genetic material. Okay? And then for eukaryotic cells, the genetic material or DNA is surrounded or contained in a membrane-bound nucleus. Then another difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, na-discuss na nako ni ganiha, we have the size. So mas bigger si eukaryotic cells because it is more complex because of the organelles. Then I have also mentioned this one. So these are the following organism groups that belong to prokaryotes, and then these are the organism groups that belongs to eukaryotes. Okay? So now we are done with lesson 3. So let us proceed to lesson 4. So lesson 4 is about cell types. So for this lesson, we will focus on multicellular organism, particularly the human organism. So we human organisms are multicellular, or we are composed of many cells, but these many cells are of different types. So for human organisms, there are about 200 different cell types. And this following different cell types here nga makita ninyo are just some of these 200 different cell types. So for this subject, we can only get to know some of them, but not all of them, okay? And as you look closely to this, each cell type, they have their own, or they have their unique structure. So why is that? Because each of the cell type having its own unique structure perform a specific nga function. So always remember this statement. Structure follows function. Structure follows function. So unsay pasabot ana? Ang pasabot ana is that kung unsa ang structure sa isa ka butang, like unsa yang shape, how does it look like, it will affect its function. Okay, I'll give you an example. So, kanang kutsara ug tinidor, diba, they are different ang structure nila. Okay? So, si kutsara is, unsa man siya? Mura man siya og kanang slightly curved. So, mao nang iyang structure is slightly curved para makakuha siya og mga liquid or fluid nga food. And then si fork or si tinidor is mura siya og made up of these grills or murag sticks. So, naapod siya spaces in between. So, if you're going to use the fork para magkuha kag sabaw, I think ang makuha nimo is just small amount or volume of liquid or sabaw because the structure of the fork is made for picking, pang tusok. So, nagets ninyo what is the statement nga structure follows function. So, mo apply po na siya sa ato ang different cell types. So, ang structure sa isa ka cell type will affect its function. Okay? So, for example, we have the neuron. So, neuron, the other term for neuron is the nerve cell. So, as you can see, the neuron is structured like kanang elongated siya. Okay? So, nganong elongated na yung structure, that is because para paspas ang transmission sa electrical signal. So, we'll get to know more about neuron later on. Okay? So, these cells that are similar in structure, so unsay pasabot ana? So, ang mga cells nga of the same type, for example, mga nerve cells or neuron cells, when they group together, they form a tissue. Okay? Because if one cell alone lang ang mo function, I think it is not fully effective to do its job. So, it needs to come together or group together to perform its function effectively. Okay? So, cells that are similar in structure or cells that are of the same type they group together to form tissues. So, tissues has specific functions. So, tissues comprises animals, plants, and other complex multicellular organism. But for this lesson, we will focus only on animal tissues, okay? But for this lesson, we will use as an example is the human organism, okay? So there are four main types of animal tissues. There are four main types or four main classes, and these are the following four main types or classes of animal tissues. So first we have epithelial, and we also have connective tissue. We also have muscular tissue, and we have the nervous tissue. Okay, so let us proceed to epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues is also known as, or you can also call that as epithelium if singular. If plural, you can call that epithelia. So epithelial tissues or epithelia can be found or can be commonly found or usually found on number one. We have epithelial tissues are found covering outside the body, which is the skin surface or the epidermis. So, the skin surface, the outermost layer of the skin, the epidermis, kabalo mo ng epidermis, so that is made up of epithelial tissues. So, function of epithelial tissues covering outside the body, it has a lot of importance or significance, no? So, number one, the epidermis or the outer surface of the skin will serve as the first line of defense against foreign bodies such as mga bacteria, viruses, okay, and other microorganisms, and also protection against the rays of the sun, and also of the changing external environment conditions, for example, ang temperature, no? So, we humans, we are known as mga endotherms or warm-blooded organisms. So, warm-blooded organism, they will maintain their internal body temperature. Bahalag, ang iyang external environment is init kayo or bugnaw kayo. So, a warm-blooded organism such as us, human organisms, we have to maintain a stable nga body temperature, which is what? 37 degrees Celsius. Bahalag ang external environment nato is unsa man, bugnaw kayo or init kayo. So if there's changes sa atong external environment, like ang temperature, so our body will adjust. So mo na kung init kayo, paningto na tong lawas para to cool down our body. And then also if bugnaw pud kaayo, so mag-shiver ta. So when you shiver, your muscles are contracting. So when muscles are contracting, it produces heat. So kay muubos man kay ang temperature, muubos man kayo ang temperature sa external environment, and we have to maintain a 37 degrees Celsius. So that heat that will generated from shivering will contribute in maintaining our body temperature. Okay, so I'm sharing too much information. And then epithelial tissues are also found in the linings of cavities. So what are cavities? So cavities of the body or body cavities, these are mga spaces. Okay? Spaces inside the body where our organs are held. Okay? So space na siya. So munang mingon sila kanabitang ngipon nga madaot. It will cause cavity. So naiuban nga mga ngipon or teeth nga kanabitang pag mabulok sila or madaot is mag-create siya og hollow spaces inside the teeth. So those spaces, that is what we call cavities. Okay? So cavities is space. So for body cavities, it is a space that holds the organs. Okay? So there are several body cavities in our body. So we have here, we call that, sige, ito siya, pleural cavity, Pleural, and this is the peritoneum or peritoneal cavity. We also have the pelvic cavity. Okay, then we also have this cavity where our heart is located. Okay, so the linings of the cavities is made up of epithelial tissues, and also epithelial tissues are found on the linings of hollow organs. So these hollow organs, example, are lungs, kidneys, and heart. So kaning mga hollow organs nato, such as the heart, the lungs, they are surrounded by epithelial tissues, or they line the lungs, the heart, the kidneys. That is because this epithelial tissue will serve as kinabitang boundary to other organs. Okay? So epithelial tissues have specific types. We have the following. We have simple squamous, or some would pronounce this as squamous. So kamoy bahala, but for me, I would prefer squamous. Simple squamous epithelium. We also have simple columnar. We also have cuboidal. So cuboidal na siya specific types. We have simple cuboidal epithelium and stratified cuboidal epithelium. We also have stratified squamous, and then we also have pseudo-stratified columnar. But sa inyong module, wala gi-appeal ning stratified cuboidal. Okay, so di lang po na ko ni siya i-appeal og discuss, because stratified cuboidal epithelium is a rare type of epithelium, and wala man siya sa inyong module, so di na lang ko siya i-discuss. Okay? So we're going to know each one of these specific types of epithelium. But before going to each one of these, so let us know that epithelial tissues are classified according to the type of cells of comprising epithelium or epithelial tissues, and also the layers, or also known as the strata, that comprises epithelial tissues. Okay, let us proceed to the types of cells comprising epithelial tissues. Okay, so epithelial tissues has different cell types. Ang iyang cell types di ay is it has different shapes. Okay, in terms of shapes, ang iyang cell types. Okay, so natay tulo, we have squamous. So squamous, these cells have a flat nga structure, or according to yung module, it's plate-like. Basta, diba, plate is flat man na siya, diba? So squamous are flat nga cells, flat shape nga cells. Then we also have another shape of cells. For epithelium, we have the cuboidal. Okay, anong cuboidal? From the word cuboid or cube, meaning more siya og square. Okay? So this is what a cuboidal cell looks like. It is much more na siya more height and more width. Okay? So more siya og kanang cube or more siya square. Okay? And then we also have cell types sa atong epithelial tissues that are columnar. So columnar meaning kanang columns. So ano siya, ang mga cells ani is ang structure sa cells is pataas or elongated. Di pa siya elongated pud kayo, no? So meron siya og kanang rectangular. So we will see this different cell shapes sa matuang mga epithelial tissue. So for squamous, it is flat. Then for cuboidal, it is somewhat pa siya square. Di po siya kanang square jud nga exact square. So more siya kanang ano lang siya ba? Na siya height, na po siya na siya extra height and width. So more duol-duol na po siya sa cube og shape. And then you also have columnar nga mga cell shape. So kani sila nga mga cells kay medyo pataas ni siya. Okay, na more na siya extra height. Okay? The next, the cells of epithelial tissues are also classified according to layers. So layers are also known as strata or munang natay makita diya nga word nga stratified. So stratified, strata, it means layer. So some of our epithelial tissues are only made up of one layer. If one layer na siya, we call that simple epithelium. If our epithelium is made up of 2 or more layers of epithelial tissues, di na ta moingon og stratified epithelium because this epithelium is made up of more than one layer. Okay, so nagets na. So now let us go to each type of epithelial tissues. So here for the illustration sa different epithelial tissues according to their shapes of the cell. We have tolo, the squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. And then we also have according sa layers of epithelial tissues it has. So natay simple, so meaning this epithelial tissue is made up of only one layer. And then we also have stratified, meaning it is made up of more than one layer. So it could be 2 or more layers of epithelial tissues. Okay? So here, look at this illustration here. So we have, example lang ha. So we have simple squamous epithelium. So meaning, simple, kay naara siya isa ka layer. And then squamous siya because ang iyang cell shape is flat or plate-like. Okay? Then another example, we have stratified squamous epithelium. So, stratified siya because, nga naman, it is made up of more than one layer. It has several layers of epithelial cells. And then, squamous siya because ang iyang mga cell shapes is flat or plate-like. So, nagets na siya. Okay, it also applies to simple cuboidal, stratified cuboidal, simple columnar, stratified columnar, and pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. So we will discuss each of this type of epithelial tissues. So first, let us go to the simple squamous epithelium. This type of epithelial tissue, so nanatay idea unsay ang structure from the name nga simple squamous. So simple, meaning this epithelial tissue or epithelium is made up of one cell. And it is squamous because ang iyaang cell shape is plate-like or pa-flat. Okay? So this epithelial tissue is kay ano naman siya, composed of one layer only. So nipis gyud siya. Okay? So where can we find simple squamous epithelium? So we can find simple squamous epithelium on the lining of the lungs. So that would be further inside the lungs. We have our you are familiar with this one, the alveoli or singular form is alveolus, or another name for this structure is the air sac. So, in alveoli or air sacs, that is where the exchange of gases will occur. So, the exchange of oxygen gas and the carbon dioxide nga gas. And also, the simple squamous epithelium are found in blood vessels. Unsa ginang blood vessels? So, blood vessels, this is where ang agianan sa atoang blood, or that is where our blood flows. So, there are several types of blood vessels with varying diameter. So, natong mga dagko kayo, no? Then, you also have itong pinakagagmay kaayo. So, itong pinakagamay kay nga blood vessel, we call that the capillary. Muna siyang pinakanipis nga blood vessel. Okay? So, ang primary function for simple squamous epithelium is for exchange of material through diffusion. And it also serves as protection, but ang primary function of simple squamous epithelium is for exchange of material through diffusion. Okay? So, for example, in our air sacs or alveoli, so the walls of our alveoli or air sacs is made up of simple squamous nga epithelium. So, for example, this is the walls of our air sac or alveoli. Okay? Then, ang tapad dayon ana niya is a blood vessel, specifically a capillary. Okay? So, ang walls atong blood vessel is ano gyapon siya kanang simple squamous epithelium. And the lining of our alveoli or alveolus or our air sac is also simple squamous epithelium. So, nganong simple squamous epithelium na siya ang nagline sa atoang alveolus or the air sac and also the capillaries. Okay? That is because dapat simple squamous epithelium na siya para ang diffusion sa gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide is easier. Okay? So, diba, we all know, kabalo naman mo about sa exchange of gases back in junior high school sa respiratory system ninyo nga topic, no? So, we take in oxygen, no? By breathing in oxygen gas. Then, that oxygen gas will go further sa ato ang respiratory tract until it will arrive in the alveoli or air sacs. Then, pag abot na sa space ay mo ang air sacs or alveoli, so that oxygen will diffuse or it will pass through from the alveolar space or the space of our air sacs padulong sa blood vessel or the capillary. Okay? And then, specifically, ang oxygen from the alveolar space will go padulong sa blood. Okay? And then, katong blood, in our capillary, it carries man pod carbon dioxide. So, that carbon dioxide carried by the blood will diffuse from the capillary padulong sa alveoli or air sacs. Pag nana siya sa air sacs, ato ang carbon dioxide or CO2, it can now be expelled out of the body by breathing out. Okay? So, mao nang simple squamous ang alveolar space or air sacs, and also ato ang capillary, it is made up of simple squamous epithelium para ang diffusion sa gases is easier. So, if imo na siya imagine nga, let us say, ano ni siya, stratified squamous epithelium. So, maglisod og diffuse ato ang mga gases. So, nagets na siya. So, mo na siya ginatawag nato nga structure follows function. So, mo nang it is only made up of a simple squamous epithelium ato ang air sac and also the blood vessel para paspas ang diffusion of our gases which are oxygen coming from the air sac padulong sa capillary para dalon siya sa blood, and then the CO2 from the blood will pass through from the capillary padulong sa air sac. So, nagets na siya. Okay? Now, let us go to stratified squamous epithelium. So from the name itself, stratified squamous, so this epithelial tissue or epithelium is made up of several layers of squamous cells. Okay, so that is multi-layered. So as you can see here, daghan kayo siya, squamous cell siya with a lot of layers. Okay, so it can be found on what body part? So it can be found on the skin. So we have here sa ato ang epidermis. Okay, then we also have sa lining of the nose, of the mouth, the esophagus, the anal canal. Okay, nagawsanan sa ato ang feces, atong tae. Then we also have sa vagina. So primary function or the only function of stratified squamous epithelium is for protection. Kaya nga naman. That is because as you can observe, no, that these parts, the skin, the mouth, esophagus, the anal canal, the vagina, it is constantly exposed. I mean, constantly na ay mga materials diha mo pass through. Like, a lot of times in a day. Okay? So, for example, sa mouth and esophagus, so, diba, sige naman tagkaon. So, the mouth and the esophagus always mo pass through ang ato ang food. Okay? So, may tabo man gud ana when materials passes through these parts, no? So, ang iya ang epithelial tissue, particularly, kani bitawng kaning pinaka-topmost layer nga mas exposed sa materials, or for example, kung sa esophagus ni or sa mouth, mas exposed sa pag-pass through sa food. So, may tabo, once mag-contact ang passing through of the food and also this topmost layer of this epithelial tissue, so mga tabo, the cells here sa topmost layer will die. They will easily die. So, ang nakanindot ani is that this epithelial tissue is stratified or composed of many layers so that when this topmost layer will die because of the passing through of materials such as food and other fluids, so kani will be replaced with a new layer of cells. So these epithelial cells will regenerate quickly to replace those cells nga namatay. Okay, so nagets na siya. And also, the skin. So, diba, the skin is always exposed to different surfaces. Okay? So, those topmost layers sa imong epidermis, they would easily die. So, it has to be replaced with another layers of epithelial cells. So, nagets now why these parts are made up of stratified squamous epithelium. Okay? Next, let us go to simple columnar epithelium. Okay? So, simple columnar epithelium, these epithelial tissues are made up of one layer because simple naman siya. Then, its cell shape or cell types is composed of columnar cells. So, as you can see, this is our columnar cells. So, they look like columns, or they are cells nga much more height, or they are rectangular. Okay? And simple columnar epithelium are found in the linings of the small intestine and also the oviduct. So oviduct is another term for that one for females. Oviducts are found in females. So oviduct is also known as the fallopian tube. Okay, so simple columnar epithelium, ang iyang function is for secretion and absorption. Okay, so about the simple columnar epithelium, di lang kay ko mo discuss ani, no? I don't want to spoil this one because I'll discuss this one next semester in General Biology 2 when we reach digestive system. So dito na ako explain why the small intestine The function of the small intestine is for the absorption of the digested materials. Okay, so we'll talk more about the digestive system when we go to general biology too. So there's a reason why the cells there is shaped like columns or rectangular. Okay, then also for secretion, because there are what we call here the goblet cell. So goblet cell, they secrete mucus. So mucus, that would serve as murag protection. But I will discuss more about this one next semester. Okay? So let us go to pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. Why is it called pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium? Okay, let us start. Why is it called pseudo-stratified? So, the word pseudo, it means false. Okay, palitan ng pseudonym. So, pseudonym means it's a false name. Di siya tinod nga name. So, pseudo means false. So, false stratified. Meaning, ana, this epithelium is not stratified. Mao nang ginatawag siya pseudo-stratified because when you look at it at one glance, more siya daghang layers. But actually, it is only composed of one layer. So what makes it look like nga daghan siya og layers? That is because ang nucleus sa atoang columnar cells, okay, this is columnar. Itong columnar cell kay dili siya wala siya gatupong ba. It is on varying heights. Okay, na nucleus diri sa taas, na uban na diri sa na diri sa ubos, ang ubang nucleus kay na diri sa taas. So, one glance makaingon jud ka nga this type of epithelial tissue is made up of more than one layer. But isa ra gyud na siya ka layer of columnar cells. Okay? And usually, pseudostratified columnar epithelium is ciliated, meaning naa siya'y cilia. So, tiba, I have mentioned sa last pre-recorded lecture about cilia. So, cilia is this more siya og hair-like nga projection sa cell nga with back and forth motion. So, that back and forth motion will help in what? In filtering materials. For filtering materials, especially if located siya sa atong respiratory tract. Okay, so for example, this epithelial tissue is found in the lining of our trachea. Okay, so trachea is part of our respiratory system or respiratory tract. So the air that you breathe in, when it passes through the trachea, so the trachea is lined with this type of epithelial tissue. So the cilia there would filter ang mga impurities. Okay, para the air nga ma-filter diri sa trachea, when it goes further sa ato ang respiratory system, particularly sa lungs, it is much more it is na siya, minimize or less na yung impurities. For example, like mga dust or any foreign bodies, na-caught na siya or na-trap na siya diri sa ato ang cilia. Okay? So, nagets na siya. And also, it has goblet cell that secrete mucus. So, ang mucus pod na po na siya function diri sa ato ang say tawag ani atong trachea. So, purpose ana is that to moisten the area. Okay? Para the filtering of the impurities nga gikan sa air nga ang atong gi-breathe in would be trapped easily pag moist ang area. Okay? So now we are done with the different types of epithelial tissues. So now let us proceed to the second main class or second main type of animal tissues, which are the connective tissues. So connective tissues is the most abundant and widely distributed tissue in complex animals. So among the four main types of animal tissue, so connective tissues are the most abundant. Okay? So why is it called connective tissues? Okay? This type of tissues, they are found in between other tissues. For example, we have here, we have an epithelial tissue, and then we also have a muscular tissue. So naa siya in between these two types of animal tissue. So it connects both these different types of animal tissues. And also, connective tissues, they connect one part to another part of the human body or of animal body. Okay, for example, we will get to see later, no? There's this certain type of connective tissue that connects um, muscle to bone. Okay? So, we'll get to know that later. So, mauna siya ginatawag siya og connective tissue because it connects various tissues or body parts. Okay? So, connective tissues, they are composed of three main components. So, we have the fibers. So, connective tissues are composed of fibers. Second, it has specialized cells. And third, it has a ground substance. So, ato siyang isa-isahon. Okay? So, connective tissues are made up of fibers. So, the fibers of connective tissues have three types. We have collagen fibers. So, this is our collagen fiber. Kaning pink. Okay? That is collagen fiber. And we also have reticular fibers. So, this is reticular fibers. Okay, kani siyang murag nipis ng fiber. Then we also have elastic fibers. Okay, where is our elastic fiber? So this one. Kani. Kani siya. That one, that one, that one. That is an elastic fibers. Then connective tissues are also made up of specialized cells. For example, we have fibroblast. So this is the fibroblast. So fibroblast, they are responsible for producing these fibers. Okay? So aside from these other functions of fibroblast. And then, as you can see, this connective tissue, nakikita ng mga spaces, di ba? So that spaces, that is not a space alone, that is filled with something, that is filled with what we call ground substance. So ground substance, it fills spaces between cells and fibers. And ground substance, it is composed of liquid, for example, water and other substances like proteins. Okay? So connective tissues have several types. So ato na siyang isa-isahon. So we have the connective tissue proper or CTP. So connective tissue proper has three types. So diha sa inyong module kay lahi ang nakabutang, no? But that is loose fibrous connective tissue. Then it must be dense fibrous connective tissue. And then we also have adipose connective tissue. Mo na siya different types of the connective tissue proper. Okay? Then we also have another type of connective tissue. We have the cartilage, we also have the bone, and the blood. So kani si blood, siya ang pinaka-unique among these other three types of connective tissues because blood is considered as a liquid nga connective tissue while kaning uban is solid. Okay? So let us go to connective tissue proper. So the first specific type of connective tissue proper, we have the loose fibrous connective tissue. So nada sa inyong module, it says loose connective tissue only. Okay, but that is loose fibrous connective tissue. Okay, so why is it called loose fibrous connective tissue? That is because it is made up of fibers. And ang pinaka-remarkable niya characteristic nga makaingon ta that this connective tissue is loose, that is because it has spaces. Mo na makaingon ta og loose connective tissue. And it is fibrous because it is composed of fibers. But few lang siya nga fibers. That is why daghan siya og spaces because few ra ang fibers. So the fibers there, we have elastin or the elastic fibers and the collagen. But dapat siya ka ng very few lang guro nga reticular, but dominantly ang naa sa loose fibrous connective tissue are elastic and collagen fibers, as you can see there. And also, as you can see, this black dots, that is the fibroblast. So the fibroblast is responsible for producing the fibers, the elastin and the collagen fibers. So ilhanan nato for this type of connective tissue is the space between the components or the fibers and the fibroblasts. So where can we find loose fibrous connective tissue? So loose fibrous connective tissue are found beneath the skin and most epithelial layers. So after sa epithelial layers, ubos ana is the loose fibrous connective tissue. And function of loose fibrous connective tissue, it is in support. So it supports other tissues and binds other organs. Okay? So next, let us go to another type of connective tissue proper. We have the dense fibrous connective tissue. Okay, so why is it called dense fibrous connective tissue? Sa inyong module dia, ang nakabutang dia is fibrous connective tissue. But that is dense fibrous connective tissue. So it is called dense. So meaning, sa means dense. Dense means paga. Okay? So this type of connective tissue proper, it is made up of collagen fibers, but in huge amounts. Okay? So mao nang daghan kay siya collagen fiber, so it makes this fibrous connective tissue dense. So wala kay makita di nga spaces. That is because the collagen fibers are closely packed. Mo na makapadense sa atoang this type of connective tissue proper. So where can we find dense fibrous connective tissue? They're found in the dermis of skin. So what is dermis? So dermis of the skin, so diba the skin has several layers. So the dermis is underneath the epidermis. So the dermis of the skin is made up of dense fibrous connective tissue and also tendons and ligaments. What are tendons and ligaments? As you can see here, nadire. So tendons, nara, asang tendons here. This one and this one. So it attaches muscle to bone. Diba? As you can see, we have here our muscle. And then the tendons attaches the muscle to the bone. Kanipod. The tendons attaches the muscle to the bone. Okay? And then the ligaments are also an example of dense fibrous connective tissue. So the difference is that ligaments attaches bone to bone. So since we have several types of bones, no, so it connects bone to bone. It holds the bone in place. Okay, so mo na difference between the tendon and the ligament. Tendon attaches muscle to bone, while ligaments attaches bone to bone. But both are dense fibrous connective tissue. And the fibers it is composed, don't forget, is collagen. A lot of collagen fibers that wala na tayo makita nga spaces. Okay? Nagya po siya fibroblast, but di ka na siya maklaro. Nakabutang dire is the nuclei of the fibroblast. So this type of connective tissue proper is siksikan. Unlike ganiha previous slide, the loose fibrous tissue na siya spaces. Okay? So the function, I forgot. The function of the dense fibrous connective tissue is for support. Now let us go to another type of connective tissue proper. We have the adipose connective tissue. So what is adipose? So adipose is another term or another name for fat. Okay? So adipose tissue, it is composed of cells that are filled with fat. So these are the adipose cells or the fat cells. So you can see how one kayo siya, or they look like bubbles, no? Overall, the adipose tissue looks like bubbles, but each adipose cell or each adipose cell or fat cell is filled with fat, and yung nucleus na siya sa sides, as you can see here. Wala siya sa tunga, na diri sa sides because siksikan naman og fat ang sulod sa tong adipose cell. Okay. And what is the function of the adipose tissue or adipose connective tissue? It functions in, I will mention this one first. It stores fat, of course. So what is the significance of fat in our body? So fat in our body is very important because number one, fat is another it is where energy are also stored. So, diba, atong primary source of energy is carbohydrates, diba? So that's why our food is mostly composed of carbohydrates, although nagyapoy fats. Okay? So inani may tabo, no? What if you are deprived of carbohydrates? Let us say you are trapped in an island and wala kay makaon. Okay? So your body will adjust para maka-obtain pa siya og energy because the body needs energy to function. So, all the cellular activities must function. So, pag wala na kay carbohydrates, your body will resort to your fats. Dito siya manguha og energy. And the amount of energy in fats are much greater compared to carbohydrates. Okay? And then, another function of fat is for insulation. So, what do we mean by insulation? So, meaning ani, it traps, diba, insulation kanang sa wire, no? So, kanang wire coating, that is the insulator. So, that is to prevent the electric current from going out, diba? So, it will contain the electrical current. But, ang pasabot na ni nga insulation for the body, for the animal body, is that it traps heat. Because, diba, as I have mentioned earlier, that warm-blooded animals, example is us, human organisms, so we must maintain a constant body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. So, for example, if the external environment is very tugnaw, for example, go winter, so mo drop man gyud ang temperature sa external environment, but we have to maintain a stable nga 37 degrees Celsius. So the fat will help you prevent the heat of your body from going outside your body. So for example, ting tugnaw, for example, kanang ting ulan ya tugnaw kayong hangin, no. So mas advantageous sa mga tawo nga they have thicker adipose tissue, diba? Wala ka na discriminate, ha. So I am one of the example. I have thicker adipose tissue, so it is advantageous to have a thicker nga adipose tissue so that the heat will retain in your body. Okay? And also another function of adipose tissue is that it cushions or surrounds organs. Example, diri sa kidney. So this fat layer, that is an adipose tissue. So it cushions organs for protection. Then, muna ni ako na-mention ganiha. Adipose tissues located in our body. We have here. Kani sa visceral, muna ni kani sa bilbil. We also have diri sa paa. Okay? So that adipose tissue would be advantageous one day if ever simbako lang you will be in survival mode. So the adipose tissue is significant, okay? And then that is all for the adipose connective tissue. So now let us proceed to another type of connective tissue. We have the cartilage. So cartilage is a type of connective tissue that are made up of collagen fibers. But this time, the collagen fibers are embedded or mixed in the substance called the chondroitin sulfate. That is why, as you can see here, these are examples of cartilage. So, ang cartilage diyan ay three types. We have the hyaline cartilage, we have the fibrocartilage, and we have also the elastic cartilage. As you can see, dili kayo maklaro ang mga fibers, the collagen fibers, because na-embed naman siya or na-mix na siya with the chondroitin sulfate. And now the collagen fibers and chondroitin sulfate kay gikan siya or they are produced by these cells called the chondrocytes. Okay? And the function of the cartilage, it cushion between bones. And I have mentioned earlier, it has three types. We have the hyaline cartilage, we also have the fibrocartilage, and the elastic cartilage. So these three types of cartilage have varying degree of flexibility. So, the elastic cartilage, from the word elastic, so siya jud ang pinaka-flexible. Then next, we have the hyaline cartilage. And then lastly, we have the fibrocartilage. So, where can we find these three types of cartilage? Okay? So, kani siya, I'll just mention, this one and this one, these are example of hyaline cartilage. So, in our rib cage, okay, so as you can see, these blue ones, these are cartilage, dili na siya bone. Except aniya, kani sa vertebra, lahi na siya nga type of cartilage. Kanilang sa rib cage, okay? So, kaning blue nga na-connect sa tong ribs and the sternum, so those are hyaline cartilage. Since cartilage are much softer than bones, no? So, unsay significance sa cartilage nga naa diri sa atong rib cage? That would allow for flexibility in breathing. So, diba, when we breathe, our lungs would expand, would contract. So, para the chest could expand and contract, it is much significant that the hyaline cartilage allows this kind of flexibility, because if imagine nimo puro na siya bone diha, so lisod kayo mo expand ang lungs when it takes in air. Okay? Then also another example of hyaline cartilage is the nose. So this blue one, that is hyaline cartilage. Then next we have the fibrocartilage kanisa tunga. So example ana, we have the vertebra, okay, or our spine. So in between the vertebrae, we have the green ones. Those are fibrocartilage. Okay, so ang function ana is for this fibrocartilage would allow our spine to be kind of flexible, no? So makaano ta, kanang we can move in various directions. Okay, and also this fibrocartilage would serve as a shock absorber. Okay, then we also have another fibrocartilage located in between sa tuang knees. So kani bitaw, we call that a wedge. We call it a wedge. Okay, so that is made up of fibrocartilage. Okay, because if wala na siya, it would be hard for our knees to be bitang mapiko-piko na to. Okay, kanang mulakaw ta. So, tiba constantly when you stand, you walk, you sit, your knees are always good siya ma-fold, diba? Then lastly, last type of cartilage, we have the elastic cartilage. So that is found in our outer ear. Okay? So ear man gyapon ning sa sulod, but the sulod, that is the inner ear, and then kani sa gawas we call that the outer or external ear. Okay? Now let us proceed to another type of connective tissue. We have the bone. Okay? So a bone is a mineralized connective tissue. So what does it mean, mineralized? So the bone is also made up of collagen, but the collagen is mixed up with minerals, the calcium, magnesium, phosphate, and iron. So these are minerals. So when they are mixed up with the collagen fibers, this connective tissue becomes mineralized, and it causes it makes this type of connective tissue rigid or hard. Okay? So the collagen fibers are produced from this type of cells. We have what we call osteoblast. And the structure of our bone tissue, if you look closely, na siya what we call as it has cells in concentric rings. Okay, so more siya kung kita kag dili, never mind. Okay, so ang mga cells niya is in rings. Okay, so our bone functions in support and protection. So because the bone would serve as support, so that for example, the muscles could attach to it, and also for protection because bone is gahi siya. And this one circular unit, we call it the osteon. So in the osteon, that is where locate ang mga dere sa tunga sa atong osteon. As you can see here, naa na siya, kita man na siya blood vessel. So bones are supplied with blood. So the blood vessels are located on the center of our osteon. So kaning osteon, kaning mga circle dire, 1, 2, 3. Okay, that is the osteon. Next, we have another type of connective tissue, the blood. As I have mentioned earlier, the blood is the only type of connective tissue nga different from the connective tissue proper, the cartilage, the bone, because blood is a liquid connective tissue. What makes it connective tissue? That is because it is composed of a matrix called the plasma. So the plasma is the liquid part, and the plasma holds other components. We have here, kabalo naman the red blood cells or the RBCs. The RBCs are also known as the erythrocytes. So, kanang word nga sites, pagkita mo word nga sites, it means cell. Okay, erythrocytes or red blood cells. Function of red blood cells, they carry oxygen. Okay, and then we also have white blood cells or also known as WBCs, and another term for that one is leukocytes. So leukocytes or WBCs na po ni siya various types, okay? So di na ko mo mention sa mga various types of leukocytes or WBCs. So the function of WBCs, that is for defense against foreign bodies. So WBCs has several types. And this specific type of WBC na siya ay kanang specific nga trabaho for defense. Okay? Then you also have platelets or also known as thrombocytes. So the function of platelets is for blood clotting. So what is blood clotting? Kanamitang masamad ka. So tibawan sa masamad ka, when your skin tears up, so blood will flow. But after some time, the blood flow depende siya sa unsa pud ang degree sa samad. For example, gamay lang pud siya. So the blood flow will over time will lessen until wala na mo gawas nga dugo. That's because the platelets will form these clots in order to prevent the loss of more blood, because it's very dangerous if wala ang platelets or dili ka mag blood clotting pag naa kay samad. Okay? Kung dili ka mag blood clot, so all of your blood will go out bisag gamay lang nimo nga samad. Okay? Now we are done with the several types of connective tissue. Now let us proceed to the third main class of animal tissues. We have the muscles or muscular tissues or muscle tissues. Okay? So the muscle tissues are composed of muscle cells. And the muscle cells, ang iyang structure is somewhat more siya og elongated, or it looks like fibers. That's why it is called muscle fibers. And muscle tissues have several types. Okay, I will introduce later on. And the muscle cells have these two types of movement. So kabalo na mo ani since junior high or elementary. So we have two types. We have the voluntary movement and involuntary movement. So what is voluntary movement? You can move this muscle under your control. Okay? So for example, if I want to flex my hands, so ma-flex yun yung mong hands because it is under your conscious control. But when we say involuntary, this movement cannot be controlled. Okay, so for example, our heart is an example of a muscle that moves involuntarily. So even if I think, heart, please stop beating, no, your heart will continue to beat until it is your fate or it is your time to die. Okay? So the muscle tissues are composed of three types: the cardiac, skeletal, and smooth. So I know na mo idea ni before. Okay? So let us get to know each type of muscle tissues. So first we have the cardiac muscle tissue. Okay? So the cardiac muscle tissue is only found where? It is only found in our organ called the heart. So the cardiac muscle tissue, iyang characteristic is that ang mga cells atong cardiac muscle, it looks like this one. It is branching. Ang form sa iyang cells is branching, more siyag branch. Then the cells of our cardiac muscle is striated. What is the meaning of striated? Striated or striations is another term for stripes. Okay? So as you can see, na siyang mga stripes diha or na siyang mga lines. So that is what we call striation or striated. And each cell, so this is one cell of a cardiac muscle. Okay? It is made up of a single nucleus. So murag mali lang ni siya nga illustration kay naman siya duha ka nucleus. But for each cardiac muscle, it has only one nucleus. Okay? Then since branching man siya ang mga cardiac muscle cells, so ang boundary sa each cell is this kaning puti nga line or kanang puti nga bands. We call that the intercalated disc. That will serve as a boundary for each cardiac muscle cell. And another significance of the intercalated disc, this will make sure that all of the muscle cells, all of the cardiac muscle cells will contract nga in synchronized manner. Okay, just like this one. Okay, and the function of the cardiac muscle is for pumping blood. So the heart 24/7 will pump in order for the blood to be distributed all throughout your body. Okay, so cardiac muscles, I have mentioned earlier, is only found in the heart or the walls of the heart. And the cardiac muscle have an involuntary movement. So that's what I have mentioned earlier, that we cannot control the muscular movement of the heart. Okay? Next type of muscle tissue, we have the smooth muscle tissue. So the smooth muscle tissue is composed of this muscle tissue cells. Okay? Ang characteristic niya is different from the cardiac muscle. Ang iyang structure is what we call spindle shape, or other would say it is elongated with tapering ends. So ang iyang ends is somewhat more tapered or more siya na siya tip. Okay? And the cells, each smooth muscle cells have a single nga nucleus. Okay, as you can see here. Okay? And the smooth muscle cells have no striations. So, sa gitong striations means katong mga stripes or lines. As you can see, the smooth muscle cells doesn't have a striation. And where does the smooth muscle is located? So you can find it in blood vessel walls, particularly katong mga blood vessel nga baga, and the walls of the digestive tract. So the walls of the digestive tract or the organs there, you cannot control their movement, ang muscular movement ana. Okay, for example, kana sa imong esophagus. So once after mausap nimong pagkaon, when the food is pushed further to your digestive tract, so the food, when it reaches the esophagus, so ang esophagus it is also made up of muscles, not only epithelial tissues, it is also made up of muscles. So when the food reaches your esophagus will have this involuntary movement called peristalsis. So we will talk about that one when we reach digestive system in the second semester. So smooth muscles have involuntary movement. So it functions in movement of substances in lumens of body. So meaning ani it functions for the movement of, for example, the food or digested material to the lumen of the body. When we say lumen, that is the central space of, for example, sa atong digestive tract. Okay, lumen is a space. And then lastly, another type of muscle tissue, we have the skeletal muscle tissue. So we call this skeletal because these muscles are attached to our skeleton or to our bones. The characteristic of the skeletal muscle cells is that it is striated. So, na siya yung mga lines or na siya yung mga stripes. And each skeletal muscle cells you can see is elongated, no? More siya og kanang one fiber. And one skeletal muscle cell is composed of multiple nuclei. So, it has more than one nucleus, or it has several nuclei. So this is the only type of muscle tissue that you can control voluntarily. Okay, now we are done with the muscle tissues. So now let us proceed to our fourth main type or main class of animal tissues. We have the nerve tissues. So nerve tissues are composed of, number one, the nerve cells, or also known as the neurons. Okay, so before we'll talk about neurons, so you have an idea how our nervous system works, right? So for example, let us have this scenario when you placed your hand on a boiling water. Okay, so in your hands or your skin, it has this what we call receptors that senses a change in temperature. So it will sense, your receptors nga nasa imong skin will sense nga the temperature is hot. So that information, or we also call that, not information, we call that the stimuli, or that is a change in the environment. So that stimuli will be perceived by the receptors on your skin. Then after the receptors in your skin will perceive that stimuli, so that will be converted into electrical signals. So that electrical signals will be passed on from nerve cell to nerve cell, or neuron to neuron. So this is the structure of a nerve cell or neuron. So once the stimuli have been converted into an electrical signal, so the electrical signal will pass on from the dendrites, then it will proceed to the soma, or also we call this the cell body. Then it will proceed to this lengthy structure here called the axon, until it will reach the axon terminal. So at the tips of the axon terminal, it is connected to another neuron. So the electrical signals will be passed on from neuron to neuron until it will reach the CNS, or the central nervous system. We have your the brain and the spinal cord. So the electrical signals will proceed to the spinal cord and then to your brain. So once the electrical signals or the information will reach the brain, so it will be processed. So your brain will tell you that, oh, it is very hot, so pull your hand away from the boiling water. So that information now will be converted again into an electrical signal, so it will be passed from brain to the spinal cord, then to neuron until it will reach um your skin. And no, it will reach to your for example, to your muscles. So to tell you that it is very hot, you should pull your hand away. So that would be your action. You will pull your hand away. So that is the function of the neurons. Then nerve tissues is not only composed of networks of neurons, as you can see this one. Okay, I chose this GIF because it best visualizes passing on of the electrical signal from neuron to neuron. So another type of cell that comprises nerve tissue, we have the glial cells. So glial cells have several types. So we have astrocyte, oligodendrocyte, but I will not specify sa iyang function, no? So glial cells, they are attached to our neurons. So what they do, they do not involve in the passing of or transmission of the electrical signal. So trabaho na nila is to support the neuron, okay, by nourishing them, for example, for providing them with substances, or for example also to protect the neuron, and also to to produce this certain type of structure sa ato ang neuron kani bitaw kaning yellow. We have the yellow ones, we call that the myelin sheath. So myelin sheath, that is very important sa ato ang axons because it makes the transmission of signals faster. Pag wala ni siya, iya kayang transmission sa signal sa electrical signals. Okay? So si glial cells tig support dyan na siya nimo whatever you do, but it does not whatever the neurons do, but it doesn't involve with the work of the neurons, which is to transmit or pass on the electrical signals. Okay, that the role of the glial cells is just to make sure that the neurons are provided with their needs, like nutrients, and also to provide them with structures, for example the myelin sheath. So that would be all for the nerve tissues. So that ends my pre-recorded lecture for module 2. So if you have any questions, just send me a PM in Facebook. So that would be all, and good day.